Ladies and gentlemen, everyone, let's start with a truth that's hard to swallow. Love doesn't always feel like love. We imagine it to be a fairy tale, a story filled with endless warmth. But sometimes love gets tangled with something much darker: shame, fear, or manipulation. So today I want to talk about the kind of woman you should never marry, not because women are the problem, but because the wrong partnership can break the best of us. When we think about the foundation of any healthy relationship, the concept of self-worth often gets overlooked. People talk about love, trust, and communication, but without self-worth, none of these can flourish. Self-worth is the quiet confidence that tells you, I deserve to be treated with respect, care, and kindness. It's not about arrogance or superiority. It's about knowing deep in your bones that your value is inherent and non-negotiable. And when you marry someone who chips away at that foundation, it's not just your relationship that suffers, it's your very sense of self. Let me start with a simple truth. The way you feel about yourself sets the tone for how others will treat you. If you don't believe you are worthy of love and respect, it becomes all too easy for someone to take advantage of that. A healthy marriage is a partnership, not a hierarchy. But when self-worth is absent or worse, actively undermined by your partner, the balance tilts dangerously. You might find yourself making excuses for hurtful behavior, rationalizing things you'd never tolerate from anyone else. A person with a strong sense of self-worth will notice these red flags early on. They'll recognize when a relationship feels more like a critique than a celebration. But someone whose self-worth has been diminished might start to internalize those criticisms. They may begin to believe that the problem isn't the relationship, but themselves. This is where the cycle of harm begins: a slow, insidious erosion of confidence that leaves you doubting your abilities, your choices, and even your identity. Consider this scenario: you're in a relationship where your partner constantly belittles your dreams or downplays your accomplishments. At first, you might brush it off as a bad day or a misplaced joke. But over time, those comments stick. They make you question whether you're as capable or talented as you thought. Maybe you start shrinking your goals to avoid their criticism. Maybe you stop speaking up about your ambitions altogether. What's happening here isn't just a loss of confidence, it's a loss of self. And the longer you stay in that dynamic, the harder it becomes to remember the person you were before. Why does this happen? Because love has the power to magnify or minimize our sense of self-worth. When we're with someone who uplifts us, it feels like anything is possible. But when we're with someone who diminishes us, it's like living under a constant gray cloud. This is why it's so important to choose a partner who builds you up instead of tearing you down. Marriage is a lifelong journey. And the person you choose to walk beside you should be someone who adds to your strength, not subtracts from it. Now let's talk about boundaries. A strong sense of self-worth allows you to set and enforce boundaries in a relationship. It's the voice that says, this is not okay, and expects to be heard. Without it, you might find yourself tolerating behavior that's harmful or disrespectful because you don't believe you deserve better. But here's the thing: boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about protecting what's inside your peace, your happiness, your identity. And a partner who respects your boundaries is one who respects you. Unfortunately, not everyone we meet will respect those boundaries. Some will test them, push them, or ignore them altogether. They might use guilt, manipulation, or even love as a way to justify their behavior. And this is where self-worth becomes your greatest defense. When you know your value, you're less likely to fall for these tactics. You can stand firm, knowing that your worth isn't up for debate. But what if you're already in a relationship where your self-worth is under attack? The first step is to recognize it. Pay attention to how you feel in your partner's presence. Do you feel uplifted or drained, supported or criticized, seen or invisible? These feelings are clues pointing to the health of your relationship and the impact it's having on your self-worth. Once you've recognized the issue, the next step is to take action. This might mean having an honest conversation with your partner, seeking support from friends or a therapist, or even walking away if the relationship is beyond repair. Taking action requires courage, but it's also an act of self-respect. It's a way of saying, I deserve better and I won't settle for less. Here's the hard part: rebuilding self-worth takes time, especially if it's been eroded over years of criticism or neglect. It's not something you can achieve overnight, but it's worth the effort. Start by surrounding yourself with people who see your value and remind you of it. Invest in activities that make you feel capable and confident. And most importantly, be patient with yourself. Healing is a process, not a destination. Ultimately, the power of self-worth lies in its ability to transform your relationships. When you know your value, you attract partners who see it too. You set higher standards for how you want to be treated, and you're willing to walk away from anything that doesn't meet those standards. Self-worth isn't just about loving yourself, it's about demanding a life and a marriage that honors your worth in every way. Vulnerability is often misunderstood. It's not weakness, and it's certainly not an invitation for others to take advantage of us. At its core, vulnerability is about courage to show up, to be seen, and to share our authentic selves, even when there are no guarantees of acceptance. In the context of marriage, vulnerability is the invisible thread that binds two people together. Without it, you have a hollow relationship, a partnership that feels safe on the surface but lacks depth and intimacy. However, for vulnerability to thrive, it must flow both ways. Imagine vulnerability as a bridge connecting two people. For the bridge to hold, both sides must contribute equally to its structure. If one side collapses, the connection weakens. In a healthy marriage, both partners take turns revealing their fears, dreams, insecurities, and hopes. This exchange creates trust, the bedrock of any enduring relationship. But when vulnerability is a one-way street, when one partner is open and the other remains guarded, the relationship starts to tilt out of balance. Think about what it feels like to be vulnerable with someone who doesn't reciprocate. You share a personal story, something that matters deeply to you, only to be met with indifference or judgment. Over time, experiences like these teach you to keep your walls up. Why risk being open if it only leads to disappointment or shame? And yet, when we shut off vulnerability, we also shut off connection. We lose the chance to be truly seen and understood. For vulnerability to function as a two-way street, there needs to be a foundation of safety. Emotional safety means knowing that your partner won't use your vulnerability against you. It means trusting that when you share your fears or flaws, they won't become ammunition in the next argument. Without this safety, vulnerability feels like a gamble rather than a gift. And let's be clear, safety doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means handling those conversations with care, respect, and a commitment to mutual growth. One of the most damaging dynamics in a marriage occurs when vulnerability is met with dismissal or manipulation. Perhaps one partner opens up about their anxieties only to hear, "You're overreacting," or "Why are you always so sensitive?" These responses create a chasm where connection should be. They send the message that vulnerability is unwelcome, that emotions are a burden rather than an invitation to connect. Over time, the person who tried to be vulnerable learns to hide their feelings, to put on a mask of strength, even when they're struggling. On the flip side, when vulnerability is met with empathy, something magical happens. Empathy says, "I hear you, I see you. Your feelings matter." It's a powerful antidote to shame, and it reinforces the bond between partners. But empathy requires effort. It means setting aside your own assumptions and truly listening, not just to respond, but to understand. It means being present in the moment, even when the conversation is uncomfortable or challenges your perspective. Reciprocity is also key to making vulnerability work in a relationship. If one partner is always the listener and never the sharer, the dynamic becomes uneven. Vulnerability isn't just about offering your own truth, it's about making space for your partner's truth as well. And this exchange builds intimacy because it's in these moments of mutual openness that we learn who our partner really is. We see their humanity, their struggles, and their courage, and they see ours. However, sharing vulnerability doesn't mean oversharing. There's a difference between being open and flooding your partner with every fear or insecurity at once. Vulnerability requires discernment. It's about sharing what's meaningful, what invites connection, rather than using your partner as an emotional dumping ground. Likewise, receiving vulnerability requires balance. It's not your job to fix your partner's problems or to carry their emotional burdens for them. The goal is to walk alongside each other, not to solve each other. One of the challenges in making vulnerability a two-way street is that it requires a high level of self-awareness. You need to recognize your own fears about being vulnerable. Are you afraid of rejection? Of looking weak? of being misunderstood. These fears are natural, but they can become barriers if left unaddressed. When both partners work to understand their own vulnerability blocks, they create a space where openness feels less risky and more rewarding. Another obstacle is societal conditioning. Many of us were raised to believe that vulnerability is a sign of weakness, especially in certain cultures or for specific genders. Men, for instance, are often taught to equate vulnerability with failure, while women may be conditioned to prioritize others' emotions over their own. Unlearning these messages is crucial for creating a relationship where vulnerability can thrive. It's not about abandoning strength, it's about redefining strength to include honesty and emotional courage. Conflict is another area where vulnerability plays a pivotal role. In the heat of an argument, it's easy to default to defensiveness or blame. But vulnerability asks us to dig deeper. Instead of saying, "You're always so inconsiderate," vulnerability might sound like, "I feel hurt when my needs aren't considered because it makes me feel unimportant." This kind of honesty diffuses tension and invites your partner to respond with empathy rather than defensiveness. It's worth noting that vulnerability as a two-way street doesn't mean that both partners are always equally open at the same time. There will be seasons in your marriage when one person needs to lean on the other more heavily. Perhaps one of you is going through a loss, a career change, or a personal crisis. In these moments, the balance may shift temporarily, but the understanding should remain: we are in this together. When the time comes, the roles will reverse, and the support will flow the other way. Vulnerability as a two-way street is not about perfection. It's about effort. It's about showing up again and again, even when it's uncomfortable or messy. And it's about choosing every single day to value connection over convenience, courage over comfort, and openness over armor. Authenticity is the cornerstone of any meaningful relationship, and marriage is no exception. At its essence, authenticity is about showing up as your true self, unapologetic, unfiltered, and unmasked. It's about allowing your partner to see you for who you truly are, and in turn, creating space for them to do the same. In a world that constantly pressures us to conform, to please, or to hide our imperfections, authenticity becomes not just an ideal, but a necessity. Without it, a marriage becomes a performance rather than a partnership. To understand why authenticity is so critical, we first have to recognize what happens when it's absent. When people enter a marriage without fully revealing who they are, they create a foundation based on illusion. Maybe it starts small, a preference you don't share, an opinion you keep to yourself, but over time, these omissions add up. You might find yourself playing a role rather than being real, agreeing to things that don't align with your values, or suppressing parts of yourself to fit your partner's expectations. While this might maintain harmony in the short term, it comes at a steep cost: the erosion of your sense of self. Marriage requires a deep level of intimacy, but true intimacy is impossible without authenticity. You can't feel fully loved if your partner doesn't truly know you. That's the painful irony of hiding behind a facade. Even when your partner expresses love, it might feel hollow because you know they're loving the version of you that you've presented, not the real you. Authenticity breaks this cycle. It allows you to be seen, heard, and loved for who you are, flaws and all. But authenticity isn't just about being honest with your partner, it's also about being honest with yourself. This means acknowledging your own desires, fears, and imperfections, even when they're uncomfortable. It means accepting that you are a work in progress and giving yourself the grace to grow. Many people struggle with this because it's easier to hide behind a polished image than to confront the messy, vulnerable truth of who we are. However, the willingness to be real with yourself is what creates the capacity to be real with someone else. One of the most common barriers to authenticity in marriage is fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as too much or not enough. These fears are deeply ingrained, often shaped by past experiences or societal expectations. For example, someone who grew up in a household where emotions were dismissed might have learned to suppress their feelings to avoid being labeled as dramatic in a marriage. This suppression can manifest as emotional distance or a reluctance to speak up about needs and boundaries. Overcoming this fear requires courage, the courage to risk being misunderstood, judged, or even rejected. It's not easy, but it's worth it. When you show up authentically, you create the conditions for a deeper connection. You give your partner the opportunity to love the real you, not the version you think they want. And while there's always a risk that your authenticity won't be met with acceptance, the alternative, living a life where you're never fully seen, is far more painful. Another challenge to authenticity is the pressure to conform to societal or cultural expectations. These expectations can be especially intense in marriage, where there are often predefined roles about what a spouse should be. Perhaps you feel pressure to be the perfect homemaker, the primary breadwinner, or the constantly accommodating partner. While there's nothing wrong with embracing certain roles if they align with your values, problems arise when you adopt them at the expense of your authenticity. Living up to an external standard rather than your internal truth can lead to resentment, exhaustion, and a loss of identity. Authenticity also requires boundaries. Being authentic doesn't mean sharing every thought or feeling without consideration. It means being intentional about what you share and why. For example, in a conflict, authenticity might involve saying, "I feel hurt when you interrupt me because it makes me feel like my voice doesn't matter," rather than lashing out with anger. Boundaries help you express your truth in a way that fosters connection rather than division. They also protect your authenticity by ensuring that you don't overextend yourself to meet someone else's needs at the expense of your own. It's important to note that authenticity is not static. Who you are today is not who you were 10 years ago. And it's not who you'll be 10 years from now. Marriage, like life, is a journey of growth and change. Authenticity in this context means allowing yourself and your partner the freedom to evolve. It means staying curious about each other, continuously rediscovering who you are as individuals and as a couple. However, this kind of openness requires mutual respect and trust. If one partner is authentic while the other is not, the relationship becomes unbalanced. For example, if you share your vulnerabilities and your partner responds with criticism or dismissal, it discourages you from being open in the future. Conversely, when both partners commit to authenticity, it creates a positive feedback loop. Your honesty invites theirs, and their honesty reinforces yours. Finally, authenticity is an act of love, not just for your partner, but for yourself. It's a declaration that you are worthy of being seen and valued for who you truly are. It's a way of honoring your own uniqueness while creating space for your partner to do the same. In this sense, authenticity is not just about individual expression, it's about building a relationship where both people feel safe, respected, and fully alive. Walking away from a relationship, especially one where love once bloomed, is among the hardest decisions a person can make. It's not simply about ending something, it's about leaving behind a shared history, hopes, and dreams that were built together. But as painful as it may be, there are times when walking away is the most courageous and self-affirming act a person can undertake. It's a testament to valuing yourself and your well-being over the fear of the unknown, a declaration that you deserve more than what the relationship has become. The courage to walk away begins with recognizing the signs that something isn't right. This can be deceptively difficult, as relationships often degrade in subtle ways. It might start with a lack of communication, escalating into constant arguments or an underlying sense of resentment. Perhaps your partner no longer shows interest in your feelings or dismisses your needs. These small cracks can eventually become a chasm, leaving you feeling unseen, unheard, and unfulfilled. The first act of courage lies in acknowledging these realities, even when denial feels safer. Often we stay in unhealthy relationships out of fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of making the wrong choice. Society frequently reinforces these fears, placing immense pressure on people to stay in relationships, even when they're toxic. Phrases like "love is about compromise" or "nobody's perfect" can make us second guess our instincts. While compromise and understanding are important in any relationship, they should never come at the cost of your self-respect or mental health. Walking away requires clarity. Clarity about what you need, what you deserve, and what you're no longer willing to tolerate. This clarity doesn't happen overnight. It often emerges after a long period of reflection and inner conflict. You may find yourself replaying past arguments, questioning whether things could have been different if only you tried harder. These thoughts are natural but often misleading. A relationship is a partnership, and its success depends on mutual effort. If one person consistently refuses to meet the other halfway, no amount of trying can make up for that imbalance. Another aspect of the courage to walk away is understanding that love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship. This is perhaps one of the most heartbreaking realizations. You can deeply care for someone and still know that they are not the right partner for you. Love cannot fix fundamental incompatibilities, nor can it erase patterns of disrespect, neglect, or emotional harm. Accepting this truth is a profound act of self-awareness, one that requires you to prioritize your long-term well-being over the fleeting comfort of staying in a familiar, albeit unfulfilling, situation. The process of walking away also demands a willingness to confront uncertainty. When you leave a relationship, you step into the unknown, a space that can feel daunting and even terrifying. Questions flood your mind: will I regret this? What if I never find someone else? Did I make a mistake? These doubts are natural, but they should not deter you from making a decision that aligns with your inner truth. Courage in this context means trusting yourself enough to believe that you can navigate whatever comes next. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because of the emotional and logistical investments they've made. Perhaps you spent years with this person, shared a home, or even built a family together. The thought of walking away can feel like throwing all of that away. But it's important to remember that staying in a relationship out of obligation or guilt does not honor the love you once shared. True courage lies in recognizing that holding on to something that no longer serves you does more harm than good, both to you and to your partner. Walking away also requires emotional resilience. Even if you know it's the right choice, the act itself can be devastating. You may experience grief, anger, guilt, or a deep sense of loss. These emotions are a natural part of the healing process, and they do not invalidate your decision. In fact, they underscore the depth of your capacity to care and connect. Courage means allowing yourself to feel these emotions without letting them pull you back into a situation that you know is not right for you. One of the hardest aspects of walking away is confronting the judgments and opinions of others. Friends, family, and society often have their own perspectives on what a relationship should look like or how much effort you should put into making it work. While advice from loved ones can be valuable, the ultimate decision must come from within. No one else fully understands the complexities of your relationship or the toll it has taken on you. Courage means standing firm in your decision, even when others don't understand or agree. Walking away is not an act of failure, it is an act of self-respect. It is a recognition that you are worthy of a relationship that nurtures and uplifts you, rather than one that diminishes your spirit. It's about choosing a life of authenticity and alignment over one of compromise and quiet despair. This choice is not easy, nor is it without its challenges, but it is a choice that honors your worth and your potential. The path forward after walking away may be uncertain, but it is also filled with possibility. It offers a chance to rediscover yourself, to rebuild your life on your own terms, and to create space for relationships that truly nourish and support you. Every step you take away from an unhealthy relationship is a step toward a future defined by self-love, growth, and freedom. Our relationships, particularly in marriage, have an extraordinary way of reflecting our inner selves. Our partners often become mirrors, revealing aspects of who we are that we might not have noticed on our own. These reflections can shine a light on our strengths, values, and capacity for love. But they also reveal our insecurities, blind spots, and areas where we need to grow. This duality is a gift, one that holds the potential to transform not only the relationship, but also the individuals within it. However, this transformation can only occur when the mirror is held with compassion, not judgment. Judgment creates walls. It breeds defensiveness, shame, and distance, making it nearly impossible for true growth to occur. When one partner uses the reflections they see to criticize or belittle the other, the relationship shifts from a space of safety to a battlefield. The person on the receiving end of judgment learns to hide their flaws rather than confront them. Over time, this creates a facade, one that protects the individual from further harm, but also prevents meaningful connection. Growth, on the other hand, requires vulnerability. It requires the courage to face the truths that the relationship brings to light, even when they're uncomfortable. But this courage is only possible in an environment of trust and empathy. When a partner reflects our imperfections with kindness and understanding, it opens the door for self-awareness and change. It sends the message, I see this part of you, and I believe in your capacity to grow. I'm here to support you, not to tear you down. Creating this environment starts with how we interpret and respond to the reflections we see in our partner. It's easy to fall into the trap of focusing on their flaws while overlooking our own. After all, relationships are often a convenient stage for projecting our insecurities onto someone else. For example, if one partner struggles with patience, they might accuse the other of being too slow or indecisive rather than acknowledging their own tendency to rush or control. This projection shifts the responsibility for growth onto the other person, avoiding the deeper self-work that needs to happen. To use the relationship as a mirror for growth, we must first turn inward. When conflict arises, the question should not be, what's wrong with my partner, but rather, what is this situation teaching me about myself? This shift in perspective transforms the relationship from a battleground to a classroom, a space where both partners can learn and evolve together. Of course, this doesn't mean ignoring harmful behaviors or sweeping issues under the rug. Boundaries are essential in any relationship, and addressing problematic actions is a necessary part of maintaining respect and trust. However, there's a significant difference between addressing an issue from a place of judgment and addressing it from a place of growth. Judgment says, you're wrong, and I'm right. Growth says, this behavior is hurting our connection, and I want to understand how we can address it together. The language we use in these moments matters. Words have the power to either build bridges or burn them. Instead of saying, you always do this, try, I feel hurt when this happens, and I'd like to work on it with you. This subtle shift invites collaboration rather than conflict. It frames the issue as something external to the relationship, a problem to solve together rather than a flaw inherent in one partner. Another critical element of using relationships as mirrors for growth is embracing imperfection, both our own and our partners. No one enters a marriage as a fully formed, perfect individual. We all carry baggage, biases, and blind spots. The beauty of a committed relationship is that it offers a unique opportunity to unpack and examine these aspects of ourselves in a supportive setting. However, this unpacking can only happen if both partners approach the process with humility and grace. Humility allows us to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, that we are still learning, and that our partner might have insights we haven't considered. Grace, on the other hand, allows us to extend kindness and forgiveness not just to our partner, but also to ourselves. Growth is rarely linear and setbacks are inevitable. What matters is the willingness to keep showing up, to keep showing up, to keep trying, and to keep choosing love over fear. This approach to growth also requires a commitment to honest and open communication. Transparency is the glue that holds this dynamic together. When partners are willing to share their thoughts, feelings, and reflections without fear of judgment, they create a space where growth becomes a shared journey rather than an individual struggle. This mutual openness fosters a deeper sense of trust, making it easier to navigate the challenges that arise. Finally, it's important to recognize that the growth inspired by relationships extends far beyond the individuals involved. When we learn to approach our partner with compassion, curiosity, and a commitment to growth, we carry those same qualities into other areas of our lives. We become better friends, parents, colleagues, and community members. The lessons we learn within the confines of our relationship ripple outward, influencing how we interact with the world. Using relationships as mirrors for growth, not judgment, is a lifelong practice. It requires continuous effort, reflection, and a willingness to embrace discomfort. It's not about erasing conflict or pretending that everything is perfect. It's about approaching imperfection with a mindset of learning rather than criticism. It's about seeing challenges not as threats to the relationship, but as opportunities to deepen it. And ultimately, it's about recognizing that growth is not a destination, but a journey, one that's richer, more fulfilling, and more meaningful when traveled together. At the heart of every meaningful relationship lies a delicate balance between love, respect, and the courage to face truth both within ourselves and with each other. Whether it's the bravery to be vulnerable, the commitment to authenticity, the strength to walk away when necessary, or the humility to see relationships as mirrors for growth, each aspect of a healthy partnership demands intention and integrity. These principles aren't just ideals, they are non-negotiable elements that create the foundation for deep connection and mutual fulfillment. As we navigate the complexities of relationships, we must remember that they are not simply about finding someone to complete us, but about partnering with someone who inspires us to become the best version of ourselves. It's in the space between our individuality and our shared experiences that love truly thrives, a love rooted not in perfection, but in the shared willingness to grow, evolve, and walk through life together with courage, grace, and unwavering honesty.